I don't think I'll ever forget this day. It was about 6 years ago, and I had just gotten my first wireless access point. It was some D-Link off brand from Fry's Electronics. They had it on sale for it was like $70 back then. It was pretty expensive compared to what cheap wireless access points are nowadays. But I went to the store and brought it home, and I unboxed it and plugged it all in. I got a new wireless card for my laptop too, and I was so excited because I thought this wireless thing, is it possible that I could be plugged into nothing and still get on the internet? And I went out to the couch and installed my new wireless card in the laptop, and everything seemed to get an IP address, and I kind of held my breath. The moment of truth. I double-clicked Internet Explorer, and sure enough, shoom, MSN.com splashes across the page. And I literally screamed. I was like, ah! And I jumped up off the couch. I was like, Sue! And my wife was in the kitchen. I said, I'm on the internet. And she looked at me and was kind of like, right. She had pretty much gotten used to my geekiness by this point. And I ran with the laptop above my head. I ran to another room and went to another page, google.com. And I was like, Sue, I'm still on the internet. And I spent probably the next 5 minutes running around the house into each room of my house going, I'm on the internet. Holding this laptop above my head. I was so ecstatic about this. And nowadays, you go into businesses and people are like, the wireless is down. We need our wireless. I mean, it's from the most whiz-bang wow technology into this like, oh, we need this now. It's a business need. And in the snap of a finger, wireless has taken over the world. So that's what we're going to talk about in this video. We're going to talk about wireless networking, starting off with the styles and facts about wireless networking. Then we'll get into the world of radio frequency. To be successful at wireless networking, you have to have an idea of radio frequency. I know it sounds boring, but it's actually very cool, at least the stuff that we're going to talk about as it relates to setting up wireless. Then we'll wrap up by talking about the three major, well, I guess you could say four major standards now of wireless networks and the organizations that manage them. Starting off, there are many different types of wireless networks that exist in the world today. You have what's known as a PAN, a personal area network. And a PAN is essentially a small, I would say a few feet radius network that is typically to connect devices like you see on the screen, a little Bluetooth headset or a wireless mouse and that sort of thing. It's considered personal because it's not supposed to leave your personal space, or once you get too far beyond your personal space, the signal will fade. That's where you move into the next step up, and that is a local area network. That's going to be what we talk about in this and the following video, where we look at wireless networks that replace, or I shouldn't say replace, I would say supplement the wired local area network. Bigger than that, they have metropolitan area networks, and that's typically where you have now point-to-point wireless bridges. This is becoming a pretty hot technology where people will start mounting dishes, kind of like you see on there. That's a pretty big one, actually, on top of their building, and will shoot a wireless signal to their building, maybe 10 miles away in the next city. So these metropolitan area networks are becoming a pretty viable alternative to paying for expensive private lines between offices. Finally, we hit wide area networks, and that's typically where you move into technologies like cellular. Cellular is one of those technologies that has been evolving kind of behind the scenes. We've seen it slowly increasing in bandwidth, and about a year ago, from when I'm talking now, Apple introduced their new iPhone, which some people will think will be revolutionary because it is now tapping into a higher speed data network. It's kind of changing what people thought was possible from tiny devices. So I'm expecting the wide area network, or I guess you could say cellular network, to really keep improving in its efficiency as well, till someday we pretty much have networks of, well, no real wires that we can see at all when we're connecting up to things. Before we get into the specifics, let's talk about the facts of wireless networks because it'll change the way you see this technology. First off, wireless access points take a step backwards. And when I say wireless access point, I mean the device you plug into a switch to get wireless access. It operates and communicates like a hub. meaning that we've moved backwards from having our, each port being a dedicated collision domain and full duplex into a world of shared signal and half duplex, meaning the more clients that you have joining a wireless access point, the less bandwidth, or the way we see bandwidth now is frequencies, are available for everybody else to use. So you reduce your speed and you reduce your capability to a half duplex connection, since there is no way wirelessly to send and receive at the same time. Now, wireless LANs also use unlicensed bands of radio frequency. We'll look at that in depth on the upcoming slides. But radio frequency and being unlicensed is just bands that are not managed. Meaning in the United States, we have the FCC that manages all our wireless frequencies and who can use what. And if you start broadcasting on these frequencies that aren't yours, you are considered breaking the law and can be susceptible to stiff fines or even prison time. I don't know if you remember the movie Pump Up the Volume, 1980s movie with Christian Slater, where he ran his own little pirate radio station out of his closet or something like that, and everybody was getting into this radio station. It's kind of funny, but he ended up getting busted because he was operating on frequencies that were not allowed. Wireless uses unlicensed, which means you do not have to apply for a permit. You don't have to go to anybody and say, I need a license to set up a wireless network. That's good because it saves a lot of litigation and a lot of cost to doing that, but it's also bad because you know what? If you are in an area that's saturated with other wireless networks and you didn't try to put yours up there, there's no one to complain to and say, hey, all of the radio frequency is used in my area, or they've got some device that really messes it up. I mean, it's all unlicensed. That's the idea, is no one really cares. It's kind of first come, first serve. Wireless is a physical and data link standard. So on top of this, this is just changing the foundation of how we communicate. It's not changing the logical functions, meaning we still have IP addresses, we still have MAC addresses. Wireless kind of borrows that same concept from Ethernet. So just about all of the same standards above will apply. It's just we're changing the physical way we connect. Below that, it mentions it uses CSMA-CA instead of CSMA-CD. Now, we have to think back to our Ethernet standards. Collision detection was CD, and that was where the devices waited until somebody where nobody was talking on the line, wait until they didn't hear anything, and then they would transmit. Now, if two devices transmit at the same time, you'd have a collision. They could detect that and resend the data. CSMA-CA is collision avoidance. What that means is that wireless can't handle collisions. It doesn't have any detection mechanism where if there is a collision to be able to go, oh yeah, our airwaves collided, let's go ahead and resend that data. It just gets scrambled and lost in the air. So collision avoidance is a method that before a device sends, it actually sends out a message saying, I'm ready to send, and it waits for the access point to respond and say, oh, you're clear to send. Go ahead and send your data. So it actually has to preempt the whole wire, or the whole radio wave, if you will, and say, I'm ready to send. Please make sure nobody else sends right now. The access point says, got it, we are clear to send, and a packet goes across the line. It seems really inefficient, but that all happens very quickly, and that ensures that we never have a collision. It's literally avoiding collisions. The last one is facing connectivity issues because of interference. Wireless seems so easy. And a lot of times it is. I'm not going to say it's always difficult, but I'll tell you what, in the business world, I've been to at least 3 companies and set up wireless where I'm thinking, piece of cake, just throw a couple access points here and there, only to find out that there's other businesses all over the place running all kinds of equipment. I've had airports that messes up the signal. I've had other wireless networks. I have microwave ovens that mess up the signals. And we'll talk about all these things in just a moment. But you have to keep in mind that there are connectivity issues we never had to deal with in the Ethernet world. We're talking about airwaves and signals going through the air, and that's just a whole new terrain for networks to cross. Let's talk a little bit about the unlicensed frequencies that our wireless networks use. I think of radio frequency a lot like I think of parking spots. Like when you go to the store and there's certain parking spots that are available for everybody. For example, my wife and I recently had a baby, and there's this store called Babies R Us that we would go to far too many times to get all sorts of baby stuff to prepare for this new little one. And they have, of course, when you get there, there's the handicaps parking spots, and you have to be disabled in order to park in one of those. And to be considered disabled, you have to apply to the DMV and get a special tag for your car. Now, right beyond those was the pregnant mother parking spots, and we got to park in those. It's pretty cool because we get a short walk just because my wife was pregnant, and I got to benefit from that. But they're kind of like the reserved. And then beyond those parking spots is like the free for all. You know, whoever gets there first is allowed to park there. There's no restrictions other than you can't be obnoxious and just park your car like vertically across these things and take up 3 spots for one vehicle. Well, that's how these unlicensed frequencies work here. There are some frequencies that are reserved. You've got to apply for a permit from, say, the FCC, and you got to pay them on a monthly basis. And there are some other ones that are fair game, free for all. The ones that you see on the screen are in the United States, the unlicensed frequencies that we have. Now, before I go any further than that, let me talk about United States versus the rest of the world, because I know a lot of the people listening to me are not from the United States. There are other agencies, and depending on what country you are in, that will manage the wireless frequencies. Over in Europe, for example, they have an agency that essentially matches these unlicensed ranges, but they actually give a little bit more flexibility, meaning there's more of a range for some of these networks that you can use in Europe. So your best bet is to check your local government standards of what is unlicensed. There's nothing worse than setting up a wireless network and all of a sudden ending up with letters in the mail, or I don't know how it works, people kicking down your door, who knows, saying you can't run on those frequencies. So you need to know what's licensed in your area. These 3 unlicensed ranges are the typical, meaning wherever you go in the world, they'll usually have something around these ranges, because if they didn't, then you wouldn't be able to mass produce wireless equipment. Let's step away from wireless networks for a moment and just talk about cordless phones. Cordless phones, just phones that not cellular, but cordless, things that you just plug into a normal phone jack and you get cordless phones capabilities. Those typically use these 3 ranges. And I'm sure if you've bought a cordless phone, you remember the 900 megahertz phones, the 2.4 gigahertz phones, and now they have the 5.8 gigahertz phones that are available to purchase and stuff like that. And you can actually use these different phones without buying a license and stuff like that, and they mass produce them worldwide. So you'll see these frequencies that are kind of repeated all over the place, just some basic differentiation. Now, let's talk about the parking spots one more time. I mentioned that the parking spots are free for all, kind of anyone who gets there first, fair game, but you can't be obnoxious. Meaning if you just vertically park across those parking spots and take up 3 for your one car, then you're going to get a ticket. And that's the same way here, meaning that if you go out and maliciously try to hog this bandwidth, meaning there are devices, jammers, there's powerful antennas and all kinds of stuff that you can buy and hook up that will literally wipe these ranges out for anyone within a mile radius of you. If you're found to be doing that, and they can't track you down because people are going to start complaining, being like, hey, we can't get anything in this area, they're going to find out that you are purposely trying to steal those bands and those ranges, and that is not allowed. So we will see devices that will use each one of these ranges. Now, let me talk a little bit more about what the differences are, what's better about the ranges. The lower the frequency, meaning 900 megahertz is lower than 2.4 and 2.4 is lower than 5, the lower the frequency, the further range you get, but the less bandwidth. Now, I have a specific slide dedicated to this, so I don't want to get too deep right now, but this is why you don't see 900 megahertz wireless equipment coming out. Sure, you'd probably get a much better range if you use that, if as long as there's no interference, but at the same time, there's not enough bandwidth in the 900 megahertz range, which is why the major wireless gear started in the 2.4 gigahertz, and we'll talk about that right now. Radio frequency is not just like Ethernet cable, meaning that as you send a wire through the wall, there's no issues. You just drill the hole and run the wire, and it works just fine. With RF, the waves are absorbed by passing through walls. Like if you have drywall, like I'm staring at right now, as the radio frequency passes through that, depending on the amount of insulation, the amount of wood that's in those walls, the thickness of the drywall, and so on, it will absorb a certain amount of that signal and decrease the range. Metal is one of those substances that will just reflect the signal, meaning if you've got a giant metal wall, it's a great way to keep your signal from going beyond a certain point because it literally bounces off. It's like an impenetrable shield, so you will not get a signal on the other side. That plays a big role into your placement of your wireless access points. The higher data rates have shorter ranges, meaning the more speed you're using, the closer in you need to be to that wireless access point. Likewise, the higher frequencies of RF have higher data rates. I was just mentioning that on the previous slide. So as you move from 900 megahertz to 2.4 gigahertz to 5.x gigahertz range, you're going to move into higher frequencies that support higher data rates. Now, couple that with higher frequencies of RF have shorter ranges. If you're using 5.8, you can't go as far as you can with 2.4. With 2.4, you can't go as far as you can with 900 megahertz. So coupling all those things together, I know it sounds like I'm duplicating bullets, especially that second and fourth one, but I want to make sure that you catch the difference. We've got the wireless access point. We'll say that we've got one of them that runs in the 5.4 gigahertz range. We've got a second wireless access point that runs in 2.4 gigahertz range. Now, just because of the nature of radio frequency, the higher frequency one, meaning this one, cannot go as far as that one. So the frequency itself of 2.4 can go further than 5.4, but this one is able to have higher data rates. Now, how is that not duplicated with this bullet? Well, higher data rates have shorter ranges. That means if, let's say I'm using 2.4 gigahertz, I will have a higher data rate if my laptop is here versus sitting right here versus sitting here and sitting here. Meaning within the same radio frequency, the further I move from that access point, the lower and lower speed I'm going to get. Now you might notice my little note in red down here that says, check out Cisco's Wireless Explorer game. I'm telling you, it's great. Let me bring it up for you right here. It is available from the ccna Prep Center. And if I haven't shown that to you yet, it's you go to www, where am I? Here we go, right tab. You go to www.cisco.com/certification, and underneath there you click on the CCNA program, and it'll show you all the paths to get there. At the very bottom of that, you'll see this link for CCNA Prep Center. Now, when you click on that, it will take you, well, it'll ask for a logon. You just need to register with Cisco and give them permission to spam you for the rest of your life, and they will give you access to this page. If you move over to the additional information tab, and scroll down, you see this section for games. Now this one is such a confidential game, they actually hide it under the More Games section, and that's where you see the Cisco Wireless Explorer. Now let's see, with all these new tabs that open, if I can actually find it. There it is. This is what the Wireless Explorer looks like. It says click here to play. Now we're talking some flash animation here, buddy. That's some intense graphics. And I know you can't hear it, but right now in my headset, in my ears, I'm hearing this whoosh of this ship flying up. We've got intense special effects. But you're essentially setting up wireless access for aliens. And it starts off very simple, saying, you know, these are the aliens who need a wireless signal. Click here, you know, access points are broadcasting. It's kind of like a train as you go. It says, go ahead and install a wireless access point, and then attach an antenna to it. So this shows, you know, it's the introductory level. It shows you that you can now place these access points, put on an antenna, and you've now provided access to the aliens. I know it looks very simple, but as you go further and further in this game, they will introduce new types of antennas. They'll introduce barriers in there that will attempt to shorten your range, and you have to move your antennas and direct your signal around those barriers and so on. So it actually does show you a lot about the different types of antennas and how wireless signal operates. Now that we have a basic understanding of radio frequency, let's talk about the 802.11 lineup. 802.11 is the standard, meaning the wireless standard that has been created for all of these wireless networks to comply to. Ethernet was 802.3. And it's funny because very few people know Ethernet standards and what fast Ethernet and gigabit Ethernet really are. But everybody knows 802.11a, b, G, all these different standards that are out there, because we, for whatever reason, chose to refer to wireless using the standard instead of like wireless and fast wireless and gigabit wireless, kind of like we did with Ethernet. So with this concept in place, you see these three different standards that are considered the mainstream. Now, the most important fact is missing of this, and that is what radio frequency they use. 802.11b was one of the first to come out, and it uses the 2.4 gigahertz range. Now you can see that we have that being official as of September 1999. Now, before I even talk further about that, I want to also direct your attention down here to 802.11a. This uses the 5.8 gigahertz range. And you can see that it also was official as of September 1999. So they released two competing standards at the same time. Now, even though they were released kind of coinciding with each other, the 802.11b standard ended up winning. Not because it was better. You can see that the speed of 802.11b only reached 11 megabits per second. 802.11a walked out of the gate with 54 megabits per second. So it really blew 802.11b away. Furthermore, it has more channels that it has at its disposal. You can see different clean channels. We haven't talked about the channels yet. 802.11b only has 3 clean channels that you can use, and that means without interference. And again, we'll expound more on that in just a moment. 802.11a has 12 to 23, depending on what area of the country you're in, of clean channels that are available to your disposal. It's amazing how much better 802.11a is than B. But the funny thing is 802.11b1, kind of like the beta VHS VCR technology, in this sense because it was just more available. When they were producing this equipment, 802.11a used a silicon in their chips that was just in a shortage. Not that it couldn't be made or anything like that. It's just they were short on that silicon at the time of the release. And wireless was one of those technologies that was so cool, people were ready to jump on it no matter what they had to buy. And when they looked on the shelf and saw, you know, only one 802.11a wireless access point and 50 different brands of 802.11b, they're like, oh, well, this must be the better standard. And, you know, I can't seem to find a network card for A, so why not just use B? Because when this came out, remember, this was 7 years ago or so, that was really going mainstream. Well, 1999, it says it was official, but the equipment didn't really come out until around 2000, 2001. But my point is that 11 megs per second was great for most people. I mean, the internet connections still don't really get to that type of bandwidth, so that would be just fine for most end customer use. So that's the story of why B ended up winning and becoming the most popular standard. 802.11a, since it used a different frequency, is not cross-compatible with B or G. It's in a completely different class of equipment. Now, let's move down to 802.11g. This one came out in 2003. It also uses the 2.4 gigahertz range. That was why G remained popular and everybody didn't convert over to A, is because this was the one that maintained its backwards compatible nature with 802.11b. up to 54 megabits per second, so it went right into competition with A. But the disadvantage of G and B is because they're still stuck in this range of 2.4 gigahertz, they only have 3 clean channels that you can use. I'll tell you why that's so essential, again, on the upcoming slides. So we have all these different standards that are available, and as of right now, as I'm recording this video, the big mystery that I don't have on here is 802.11n. Now, by time you're watching this, this may very well have become a standard, and all these questions will have been answered of 802.11n and what it is going to become. But as of right now, it is considered a pre-draft standard, meaning it's not finished yet, and all of the documentation hasn't been written. The benefit of 802.11n is that you move into the 100 plus megabits per second speed using this technology that is kind of been code-named or commonly named MIMO, multiple input, multiple outputs. Essentially, you just use multiple antennas to send dueling signals at the same time. Now, the big decision that has yet to be made on N in the pre-standard is whether it will go this way and remain backwards compatible with B and G, or whether it will take a turn and go this way and become one of the A style of standards because of the flexibility that you have with the channels on A. Now, my instinct is telling me that it's going to go with the B and G, and that's just because there's a lot of vendors that have already begun producing, and you may even own some pre-draft equipment, and they decided to produce it with the 2.4 gigahertz range. But again, buying anything pre-draft is scary because they might just say, oh, well, we'll go this direction, and suddenly all of your pre-draft equipment is useless. So that's the final standard that is still yet to be decided. Now let's talk about this mysterious channel concept that I've been mentioning on the different standards. 802.11b and G have up to 3 clean channels that you are able to use. Now, channels are essentially ranges of frequencies. Now, I talked about radio frequency already and talked about how we can have different radio frequencies that are available to us in the unlicensed band. Now, I mentioned that there was this 2.4 gigahertz range right here that 802.11b and G uses, but when you set up a wireless access point, it's not like it just consumes the whole range, like, oh, 2.4 is now gone because that access point is using it. It actually uses just a section of that range, and that is defined using the channel. 22 megahertz channels are created that each one can use. Now, if you've ever set up a wireless access point, you might think, well, in the setup, I saw that there was 11 channels. That's plenty more than 3. But if you look at the actual frequencies that they use, they overlap. For example, you can see channel 1 uses this range of frequency. I don't have the specific range defined, but you can just add 22 megahertz to this and find out what it's using. Channel 2 begins right here. I'm kind of highlighting it in the background and ends over here. So what that means is if I have an access point running in my network and my neighbor decides to set up an access point, I use channel 1 and he uses channel 2, these access points will end up causing interference with each other. They'll overlap their frequencies and cause degraded or even an unavailable signal in that overlapping range. So you can see that 2 overlaps, 3 is in red down there, it overlaps with 1, 4 is in blue, 5 is in green right here, you can see it's just barely overlapping with 1, and then we have 6. 6 is in bold, you can see 1, 6, and 11 are in bold because they are the only ones that have purely clean signals that don't overlap with each other. 1, 6, and 11 are untouched when it comes to each other. Now, I know for myself, I've set up, after I learned about channels, I was like, oh my goodness, because I thought about all the networks that I've set up that are wrong. Because you just look for a free channel. You can use a wireless sniffer, just like you can have a packet sniffer, and see what channels people are using around you. You go, oh, well, they're using 1 and they're using 11. I guess I'll just use 3. Well, what you're doing is you're goofing up yourself and you're goofing up the person next to you that's using 1 because of your overlapping signal. That's why 802.11a is so much better, and that 5.8 X gigahertz band is so much better because you have up to 23 different channels that you have available for your use that are considered clean. Now, I know it doesn't show them all in this picture right here, but there are plenty of available channels that you have to use. That gives you more flexibility when you have a company, or maybe you're in an apartment complex with all these apartments around you and all the channels are in use. Well, that's where you can convert over 802.11a and definitely find a free channel. Same thing in business complexes, in a larger company that has need for more than one access points. Speaking of which, let me show you how to set up your access points in your organization. Wireless access points have a range of about 300 feet without obstruction, meaning 802.11a is a little shorter than that, but it's around 270 or so feet that it can go. But around 300 feet without obstructions in the way, meaning the more walls you go through and desks and offices and so on, you're going to end up with shorter range. So when you set up your access points in your company, you're probably going to need more than one. Your goal is to set them up with non-overlapping frequencies. Again, we should have our access points. This, every single one of these cells, this is known as a wireless cell, represents one access point. You might have an access point that reaches, we'll say 300 feet in all these different directions, and, well, we'll say 150 feet in these different directions. And then you need another one right here. You'll place it, but you'll set it up on a different channel than this one, so that where this boundary ends, and you can have some overlap in your signals right here. It's actually recommended to do that, to where you've got about a 10 to 15% overlap, where your one signal ends, the other one begins on a different channel. Because if you're using the same channel, this overlap right here will actually cause interference with each other, and you'll probably lose wireless signal as you walk through that. Since the mainstream is 802.11b/g in the standards, we typically have 3 channels to work with. So your goal is to set up your access points to where the cells are all blocking each other from overlapping. You've got 3 different channels to use. Use them wisely and try to set up your cells to where you don't have any interference with other channels. Of course, the one that always throws the fork in the wrench is the partner company sitting next to you over here that has an access point using channel, 8, because they don't know what they're doing, which takes out both 6 and 11. Now, remember, these are unlicensed bands, so if they want to use 8, they can use 8. What your job is to go over there and convince them not to explain that not only are they messing up your network, but you're messing up theirs, and they're going to lose their signal. So it's a win-win situation if they decide to use channel 1, at least in that picture right there, and not cause any interference. The last thing that we'll talk about is the powers over the radio world. Who manages all this wireless stuff and comes out with the standard? Well, there's 3 different organizations. The first one is the ITU-R, the International Telecommunication Union Radio Communication Sector. They are the ones that regulate the radio frequencies used for wireless transmissions. Those bands, those unlicensed ranges, they're the ones that say wireless networking equipment will use these ranges, and these are the channels that they will use, and so on. So that's the first organization. The IEEE, which is Institute of Electrical and Electronic Engineers, is the ones that maintains the standard itself. Not the radio frequency, but the 802.11a, b, g. They're the ones that are developing the 802.11n standard. So they're the body that maintains all of that. The last one, Cisco actually plays a big role in. It's known as the Wi-Fi Alliance. They are the ones that own the trademark to the Wi-Fi Alliance symbol. You'll see it on wireless equipment. And all it is an organization that tests the equipment to ensure interoperability between each other. So for example, I can buy a Netgear wireless card and it works with a Cisco access point because they both belong to the Wi-Fi Alliance. It's kind of like, I don't know if you're a Windows person, but in Windows they have this new thing called driver signing, where the vendor of whatever driver for a video card or network card or whatever actually goes to Microsoft and they go through extensive tests to make sure the driver works and doesn't cause any problems, and they get this Microsoft certified driver signing that happens to where their driver will be accepted without any error messages in Windows. Wi-Fi Alliance is kind of the same thing, but for network gear. Wow, I had more to say about wireless than I thought, and there's still even more to come in the upcoming video. So let's wrap this up and hit the high points. We first off saw the styles and facts about wireless networks, kind of the basic foundation. We then looked at the world of radio frequency, and what I would say is especially important is understanding the concept of channels, because that will allow you to set up multiple wireless access points successfully next to each other. We then saw wireless network standards, the 802.11 standards, and the organizations that manage them. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.